Right. Imagine you've just made a perfect cup of tea. The water is precisely boiled. The bag has been steeped for the optimal duration. A splash of milk, just so. You lift the mug to your lips, anticipating that first glorious sip. And then, suddenly, the entire planet decides to cosplay as a giant snow globe. All of it. Instantly. This isn't your average British winter, where we complain about a light dusting of snow shutting down the national rail network. This is a proper, world-ending, no more warm socks kind of freeze. A geological snap of the fingers. It's a rather inconvenient turn of events, especially for your tea, which is now a solid block of milky ice. The question, then, isn't whether your day is ruined. It most certainly is. The question is whether all of humanity's days are ruined forever. Could we, a species that has become quite accustomed to central heating and ordering pizza on an app, actually survive a spontaneous ice age? It seems unlikely. We get flustered when the Wi-Fi drops. A 2-kilometre thick sheet of ice moving slowly towards your garden shed feels like a slightly bigger problem to solve. But are we truly that helpless? Let's take a brisk, hypothetical stroll through this frosty new reality. Do wrap up warm. Enjoying this? Please like, comment and subscribe. It helps a ton. Thank you for supporting us. Before we plunge headfirst into this icy catastrophe, let's establish the ground rules. We're not talking about a gradual cooling over thousands of years. That would be too easy, too sensible. No, this is an immediate, almost magical freezing. The next moment, the question is whether you can fashion a jacket out of your frozen neighbour. It's a dramatic shift in priorities. The sun is still there, bless its gassy heart, but its warmth is mysteriously failing to reach the surface. The world's thermostat has been turned down to its absolute lowest setting, and the dial has broken off. So here we are, standing on a rapidly freezing planet, holding a teacup-shaped ice lolly. The initial shock would be considerable. Panic would be, I suspect, quite fashionable. But humanity is a surprisingly resilient bunch. We've survived all sorts of things. Plagues, wars, television singing competitions. Perhaps we have a fighting chance. Perhaps beneath our soft, fleece-wearing exteriors, there are hearts of rugged Ice Age survivors. Or perhaps we're all just destined to become very well-preserved museum exhibits for some future, more thermally competent species. The only way to find out is to press on. What happens first? Besides the obvious, all-encompassing cold, before the great unscheduled refrigeration, our world was, for the most part, quite pleasant. Geographically speaking, anyway. We had a system. The sun warmed the equator more than the poles. This temperature difference created currents in the air and in the oceans. These currents moved heat around like a planetary delivery service. This gave us our weather: rainforests, deserts, the reliably damp British Isles. A delicate, interconnected dance of water and air powered by a distant star. It allowed us to grow avocados in one place, ship them to another so they could be smashed on toast. This global heating system dictated everything, where we could grow food, build our cities, and comfortably go on holiday. Most of the 7 billion or so of us lived in temperate and tropical zones, places where you didn't need 17 layers to pop to the shops. Our civilization was built assuming a stable climate. Vast cities of glass and steel, endless roads, a global economy moving things from warm places to less warm but not frozen places. Fruit, not freezing to death. Our lives were governed by predictable warmth. We woke up, we went to work, we went to school. A vast, invisible network, power grids, water pipes, supply chains, electricity for our screens, water for our now frozen tea. Food from farms hundreds or thousands of miles away, a fragile miracle of logistics humming in the background. We took it for granted. Celebrity gossip, the baffling endings of popular television series. The warmth was just there, like the sky, or the background radiation of the universe. And then, it wasn't. The switch was flipped. The planetary heating system was unplugged. The delicate dance of currents simply stopped. Heat was no longer being delivered. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The normal world, smashed avocados, reliable electricity, now a memory, a historical exhibit. The comfortable planet is gone. In its place, something new, cold, and very, very quiet. The hum of civilization replaced by wind. A very, very cold wind. Simple science fact. Earth has had at least 5 major ice ages. The last, the Quaternary, began 2.6 million years ago. We live in a warmer interglacial now, so a new freeze is less what if and more when. The first thing you'd notice after the profound and personal tragedy of your ruined tea is the sky. The air, now stripped of its warmth, can no longer hold as much moisture. The familiar fluffy white clouds would begin to vanish. Instead, the sky would become a pale, crystal-clear blue. A beautiful but deeply unsettling blue. With less water vapor to scatter sunlight, the sun itself would look different. Sharper, harsher. A distant, ineffective diamond in a frozen sky. There would be no more rainy days. Only snow. Endless, whispering snow falling from a sky that seems to have forgotten how to do anything else. Then comes the water, the big water. The oceans are vast reservoirs of heat, but our magical freeze is overriding that. The surface of the sea would begin to freeze, starting at the poles, spreading outwards with terrifying speed. Coastlines would become a chaotic jumble of ice floes. Waves would turn to slush, then to solid, jagged sculptures. The world's great ports, London, New York, Tokyo, would become encased in ice. Ships would be frozen in place, becoming permanent, useless monuments to a warmer time. The seas, the cradle of life, are becoming a solid, impassable barrier. It's simple physics, really. When water freezes into ice, it expands. But more importantly, all that water is being taken out of the liquid system. It's being locked up in solid form on land and sea. As colossal amounts of water are pulled from the oceans to become ice sheets, sea levels would plummet dramatically. We're talking about a drop of over 100 meters. The geography of the world would be rewritten in a matter of days. The English Channel would disappear, leaving a frozen, icy land bridge between Britain, France. A prospect that is, depending on your viewpoint, either horrifying or deeply convenient. All this new ice acts like a giant mirror. Ice is white, and white surfaces are very good at reflecting sunlight back into space. This is called the albedo effect. More ice means more reflection, which means less heat is absorbed by the planet, which means it gets even colder, which means more ice forms. It's a vicious, freezing cycle, a runaway feedback loop of cold. The planet is actively helping itself to get colder. It's a bit rude, frankly. Our Earth is wrapping itself in a reflective blanket of ice, pushing away the sun's warmth and plunging itself deeper into the freeze. The world isn't just cold, it's actively getting colder by the hour, and we are trapped in the middle of it. Within weeks, the landscape of our planet would be unrecognizable. The gentle green hills of England, the rolling plains of North America, the vast forests of Siberia, all would be buried under a blanket of white. At first, it would be snow, but under its own immense weight, the snow would compress into dense glacial ice. This ice would not be static. It would begin to move. Kilometre-thick ice sheets would flow from the poles and high mountains. They would grind their way across the continents, moving a few meters a day, unstoppable. An immense, silent, frozen bulldozer, scraping the surface of the Earth clean. The world map would need a serious update. With sea levels having dropped, new lands would emerge. Indonesia would become part of mainland Asia, Australia and New Guinea would be joined. These new territories wouldn't be lush paradises, they would be frozen, wind-blasted plains. The familiar shapes of our continents would be gone, replaced by a single, sprawling northern supercontinent, Laurentia Eurasia, and a similarly vast southern one centered on Antarctica. The world would feel bigger, but also emptier. The light itself would be different. Flat, shadowless days, spectacular sunrises, halos, sundogs, and pillars of light. The world would glitter, but it would be a cold, cruel beauty. Section 5. The stubborn green things. You might think a world of ice would be lifeless, and you'd be mostly right. The vast majority of the world's flora would be wiped out. The great forests, the Amazon, the Congo, the boreal forests of Canada and Russia, buried and crushed under advancing ice sheets, the endless fields that fed billions, wheat, corn, rice, grasslands would be scraped away, flowers, shrubs, delicate ferns, all gone. The planet's green lungs would collapse. The air would still be breathable for a while, but the source of its renewal would be extinguished. It would be a silent, colorless world. But life is stubborn. Annoyingly so. In a few sheltered pockets, some plant life would cling on. Around the equator, where ice is thinnest or absent, hardy grasses and shrubs might survive. Tough, low-lying plants adapted to cold and drought. Think Arctic tundra plants, but at the equator. Mosses, lichens. They can survive extreme conditions, clinging to bare rock that pokes through the ice. They would become the foundation of this new, simplified ecosystem, a world in greys, browns, and defiant patches of dark moss. And the trees. Most would be gone, but in deep volcanic valleys, or islands warmed by geothermal vents. Small, isolated forests might persist. Tiny, lost worlds, refugees of green in an ocean of white. Home to relic plant populations. Finding one would be like finding paradise. For humans, this is a fundamental problem. No plants means no farming. Our agricultural system, obsolete. We can no longer grow our food. The era of the farmer is over. The era of the hunter and scavenger returns. We'd rely on things that eat the few remaining plants, or things that eat those things. The food chain is drastically simplified. We've been knocked several rungs down the ladder. We are no longer masters of the earth. We are just another hungry animal searching for its next meal. Section 6. When mammoths come for tea. With the plants gone, the animals that depended on them would face a crisis. Herbivores that lived in forests or warm grasslands would be the first to go. Goodbye, giraffes. So long, squirrels. Farewell, cows. The mass extinction would be swift and brutal. Some animals would adapt. Those already built for cold would thrive. The great winners, the megafauna, the big furry beasts. Imagine looking out of your makeshift ice cave and seeing a woolly mammoth lumbering by, or a herd of giant bison, breath misting in the freezing air. The world repopulated by prehistoric creatures, woolly rhinos, cave lions, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats. Predators would follow the herds, packs of dire wolves. For humans, danger and opportunity. A cave lion sees a human as a convenient, slow-moving snack. A mammoth could trample your entire settlement without even noticing. Surviving means learning to coexist, learn their habits, their migration routes, their weaknesses. Relearn ancient skills, how to track, how to hunt as a group, how to bring down an animal as big as a bus with sharpened sticks and desperation. A successful mammoth hunt, life or death. One animal, thousands of pounds of meat, months of food, hide for clothing and shelter, bones and tusks into tools, weapons, art. The mammoth becomes the center of human culture. Food, clothing, shelter, story, a sacred beast, feared and revered. Survival fact. In extreme cold, the body prioritizes the core. This is why you get frostbite on your fingers, toes, and nose first. They are sacrificed to save your vital organs. So, good gloves are not a luxury. They are a life or death necessity. They would become frozen tombs. The first few weeks would see a desperate scramble for resources. But the power grids would fail almost instantly. Water pipes would freeze and burst. Food supplies would run out. The intricate systems that allow millions of people to live together would collapse. The cities, once symbols of human power and ingenuity, would become death traps, cold, dark, and silent. Except for the howling of the wind through empty skyscrapers, they would be monuments to a forgotten age of warmth and hubris. Surviving in these frozen cities would be impossible in the long term. They are built of concrete and steel, materials that absorb and radiate cold. Trying to heat a modern apartment in an ice age would be like trying to boil the ocean with a single kettle. The survivors would be forced to abandon the cities. They would flee, seeking shelter in places that offer a better chance of survival. Underground spaces, perhaps. The deep tunnels of subway systems might offer some protection from the wind and the worst of the cold. But even there, without power or supplies, life would be a grim, troglodytic existence. The age of the urbanite is over. So where would people go? They would follow the animals and the faint promise of shelter. Small, nomadic groups would form, constantly on the move. They would build new kinds of settlements. Not cities of steel, but villages of skin and bone. Huts made from mammoth ribs and covered in animal hides. Shelters dug into the south-facing sides of hills or deep within networks of natural caves. Geothermal hotspots, places with geysers or volcanic activity, would become magnets for settlement. Small, permanent communities might spring up in these rare warm zones, huddled around the Earth's own natural radiators. The very idea of a nation or a border would become meaningless. Your identity would no longer be defined by your country, but by your clan. A small, mobile group of maybe 50 to 100 people. Everyone would know each other. Everyone would have a role to play. The hunter, the toolmaker, the healer, the storyteller. Society would be rebuilt on the most fundamental unit, the family, the community. We would trade the anonymous loneliness of the city for the intense, demanding intimacy of the clan. A huge step backwards in terms of complexity, but perhaps, in some ways, a step forward in terms of human connection. If you can survive the bickering. With agriculture a distant memory, the human diet would revert to hunter-gatherer ancestors. The menu would be simple: meat, lots and lots of meat. The primary source of calories would be the great herds of megafauna: mammoth, bison, horse, reindeer. Hunting would be communal, requiring skill, bravery, immense cooperation. A single mistake could mean death for the hunter or starvation for the clan. Every part of the animal would be used. Meat eaten fresh, meat frozen for later, fat rendered for fuel and food. Stomach contents: partially digested plants, precious vitamins. A diet of pure meat is not ideal. Scurvy, lack of vitamin C, a constant threat. Humans would seek any plant matter: lichens, mosses clinging to rocks, tough leaves, mammoth stomach contents, a patch of hardy berries. Roots of a stubborn tundra plant. Finding such resources would be as valuable as finding gold. Foraging, a specialized skill, knowledge passed down generations. Knowing edible versus poisonous lichen, vital. Wood nearly impossible except rare sheltered valleys. Main fuel, dried animal dung, rendered animal fat. A smoky, smelly, life-giving fire, heart of every settlement. It provides warmth, light, cooking, and melting water. The person keeping the fire going has one of the most important jobs: life governed by the hunt. Days, weeks, months tracking a herd. Success, soul, feasting and security. Failure. Hungry times, desperate scavenging, frozen leftovers. There would be no supermarkets, no corner shops, no takeaways. The connection between effort and survival would be direct and brutal. You would feel hunger as a constant driving force. In a world where the average temperature is well below freezing, staying warm is not about comfort. It is a full-time job. The first line of defense is clothing. Our modern synthetic fabrics would be useful for a while, but they'd eventually wear out. The solution? Go back to basics. Fur, leather, hides of hunted animals would be essential. Learning to skin and treat hides would be a fundamental skill. Layers of fur, insulation, treated leather, windproof, waterproof outer shell. We'd dress like our ancestors. Boots, trousers, parkas, mittens. Fashion becomes purely functional. Shelter is next. A well-placed cave is ideal, but not always available. We'd need mobile, temporary shelters. An Arctic igloo, a dome of compressed snow, is an excellent insulator. Snow traps air, dome shape resists wind. Inside an igloo can be around 0 degrees Celsius even at -40 outside. More permanent, earth, stone, mammoth bones, sunken pit houses using ground insulation. Social status? How windproof your hut is. The Qualic, an Inuit oil lamp, becomes vital. Saucer-shaped soapstone lamp burning rendered animal fat or oil. Steady, long-lasting heat and light with very little smoke. A clan's ability to keep lamps lit could mean survival. The soft glow of a seal oil lamp, comfort. Beyond physical warmth, the warmth of community. Huddling together for warmth, literal. Stories, songs, art, sitting around the fire, sharing tales of the ancestors, of great hunts, of the warm time before the freeze. This would be the glue that holds society together. Keeping the spirit warm is just as important as keeping the body warm. Humanity would survive not just by its tools, but by its stories. A forced return to a simpler, clan-based existence could fundamentally change human psychology. With survival depending on intense cooperation, traits like empathy, loyalty, and group cohesion might become more advantageous than individualism or competition. We might become, paradoxically, more human. So, could we survive? The answer, surprisingly, seems to be yes. It would not be all of us. The initial die-off would be catastrophic. Billions would perish. But small, scattered groups of humanity would likely cling on. They would adapt. They would remember old skills and invent new ones. They would live in caves and skin huts, hunt mammoths, and tell stories around a flickering oil lamp. They would be tougher, more resilient, and more connected to their environment than we can possibly imagine. Humanity would be battered, reduced, and pushed to the very brink of extinction. But it would not be extinguished. We are, if nothing else, a stubborn species. For generations, this would be the only reality. A world of ice, giants, and epic hunts. The warm time would become a myth, a legend of a lost paradise when the sun was hot and the world was green. Children would be born who have never known anything but the cold. They would not miss our world of screens and traffic jams, because they would have no concept of it. Their world would be one of savage beauty, of clear, starry nights, and the profound satisfaction of a successful hunt. It would be a hard life, a short life, but perhaps not an unhappy one. They would be the children of the ice, perfectly adapted to their frozen home. And then, one day, something would change. Perhaps after thousands of years, the magical spell of the freeze would break. The sun's warmth would begin to reach the surface again. A spring would come that was slightly warmer than the last. A summer where the melt was slightly greater than the freeze. The great ice sheets would begin their slow, groaning retreat. Rivers would flow again. Seeds, dormant for millennia in the frozen soil, would begin to sprout. The world would begin to thaw. The descendants of the survivors would watch as their world of white was slowly reclaimed by green. They would stand on the edge of a new world, just as their ancestors did when the freeze began. They would be equipped with the skills to survive anything,
and the stories of a time of unimaginable cold. They would be the inheritors of the earth. And as they looked out over the new green valleys, they might wonder about the strange legends of the ancestors, the stories of cities that touched the sky, of metal birds, and of a time when you could get a hot cup of tea just by flicking a switch. A ridiculous, impossible idea. But, a rather nice one, all the same.